In May 1960, a mass murderer is abducted on a street in Buenos Aires. The man is snatched by agents of the Israeli intelligence service Mossad. His name is Adolf Eichmann. He didn't kill his victims in person, but is nonetheless responsible for the murder of millions of Jews in the Holocaust. But how could 15 years pass after the end of World War II before his capture? And what happened next? A story about justice, Nazi hunters, a court trial that captured the world's attention, and an execution. The story made a legend of this woman. She recognized in Eichmann what she called the banality of evil. Jewish philosopher Hannah Arendt followed the trial closely. She asked what constitutes evil and whether any of us could be an Eichmann. In Jerusalem in April 1961, a trial began that was watched by the world.
Der bestgehütete Angeklagte der Welt, Adolf Eichmann, steht in Jerusalem vor seinen Richtern. Im Anblick der Menora, des alten jüdischen Religionszeichens, wird von einer kugelsicheren Glaskanzel aus der Massenmörder Eichmann Rechenschaft ablegen müssen für den Tod von nahezu 6 Millionen unschuldiger Menschen.
The Israeli Attorney General, Gideon Hausner, has charged Eichmann with crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes against the Jewish people. Hausner says, "With me are 6 million accusers, but they cannot rise to their feet, for their ashes are piled up on the hills of Auschwitz."
15 years now to bring this man to face judgment.
Taking the witness stand are survivors of the Nazi extermination camps. The observers in the courtroom are stunned. It's the first time many of them have heard about the unfathomable atrocities committed by the Nazis in such unflinching detail, over hours, days, weeks, and months.
In 1961, when the trial begins, the global public is there. That's well over 100 journalists, broadcasting, reports every evening on television all over the world about what happened in that courtroom.
One of those journalists is writer and philosopher Hannah Arendt. She's on assignment for the New Yorker magazine and observes proceedings with a critical eye. The story is told in an award-winning film. Arendt fled men like Eichmann in her home country of Germany in 1941 and moved to New York. In 1961, she traveled to Israel to watch the trial against him with her own eyes. She wrote her best-known book about the trial and Eichmann.
Hat man Ihnen nachgewiesen, dass die Juden müssen vernichtet werden?
Ich habe sie nicht vernichtet.
Who is this stiff and emotionless man on the witness stand? And what exactly are his crimes? Adolf Eichmann had had an unremarkable career before joining Hitler's notorious Schutzstaffel, the SS. There he planned the rail transports to Auschwitz and the industrialized murder of millions of people in gas chambers. He meticulously counted the dead, a bookkeeper of extermination. He was the architect of the so-called final solution. Philosopher Bettina Stangneth has written what has become a standard work on the mass murder, translated into more than 10 languages. She looked deep into his past and his psyche.
His career success is thanks to his talent as a fraudster. There's no training program to be a murderer of Jews, but Eichmann invented his profession, the specialist for Jews.
Hannah Arendt saw in the high-ranking SS officer the prototype of a Nazi functionary, carrying out a bureaucratically administered mass murder, businesslike and efficient. Berlin, 1945. The Nazis have been defeated. Eichmann is able to hide, initially in Germany. In 1950, he flees to Argentina with the assistance of the Vatican under the alias Ricardo Clement. He travels with a forged passport bearing the stamp of the Red Cross.
Eichmann knew things wouldn't turn out well, that Hitler would not become the leader of the world, and he prepared his escape in good time.
How did the mass murderer manage to pass as a normal citizen of Buenos Aires? As Ricardo Clement, Eichmann lived in Argentina as part of a network of fugitive Nazis. He led a quiet life as a rabbit breeder and land surveyor, and he even fathered a fourth son. All is right with the world, or so it seems.
He belonged to a generation that was stopped in its tracks. Eichmann was born in 1906 and was still relatively young in 1945 at the height of his powers. He saw himself as the center of the world, which was not entirely wrong at the time, and he wanted that feeling back. He also didn't feel that his war was over.
Eichmann did return to the world stage, but not in the way he had imagined. His past was catching up. Germany's Foreign Intelligence Service, the BND, had known for a long time that Eichmann was hiding out in Buenos Aires. But the German government did not want to find him and put him on trial. Here, too, old Nazi networks still had influence.
Of course, people in Germany were very happy to not see these people again. They were afraid of their history.
But one man in Germany did look for what he called the monster. Fritz Bauer, the Attorney General for the state of Hesse.
Fritz Bauer as a real outsider in society, as a covertly homosexual man and a Jew who had returned after fleeing Germany, and as someone who came back and thought that we could now found a new federal republic and help shape it, realized there were reactionary forces and that nobody really wanted to get involved. Everyone knew that this cloak of silence had been laid over everything.
But Bauer was hindered by his own country.
Die Suche nach Eichmann.
Ich habe leider auch nichts Neues zu berichten, Dr. Bauer.
Er kann nichts machen, er ist vollkommen isoliert.
Unterschätzen Sie ihn nicht.
Ein Mann glaubt, Adolf Eichmann in Argentinien entdeckt zu haben. Obersturmbannführer der SS. Das ist die zentrale Figur.
Deeply disappointed that no one in Germany will listen to him, Bauer turned to Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency. He flew to Israel and handed over surveillance photos of Eichmann in Argentina. Israel then began preparing a military-style operation against its public enemy number one. Operation Finale began. Decades later, there's still a lot of interest in the Eichmann trials. The Potsdam Film Museum is hosting a traveling exhibition about the hunt for the mass murderer, his capture and trial. It shows that getting him on the stand was no easy feat.
There was no extradition treaty between Argentina and Israel. Locating and capturing Eichmann came after a very long and complicated prelude. A lot of people knew that he was in Argentina.
That included the U.S. intelligence agency, the CIA. They knew where Eichmann was hiding, yet did nothing. Israel, on the other hand, dispatched a handful of Mossad agents to Buenos Aires. They spent several days observing his movements from a truck, noting his routine, particularly the time at which he returned home on Calle Garibaldi. Then, on the evening of May 11, 1960, the moment had come. Mossad agents wait for Eichmann in front of his house. He arrives later than usual. Then one of the world's most wanted men is seized. As he comes down the street, one agent speaks to him. Then several others overpower him and push him into a car. On his person, they find a comb, keys, a cigarette holder, and pocket knife, but no gun. Eichmann clearly felt safe. The agents then take him to a safe house in a car with a fake license plate. The agents, who all lost family members in the Holocaust, are now in the same room with the man responsible.
Do you recognize the man in this picture?
I can't see him clearly.
The man in this picture is you. SS number 45381. Am I correct? Again, your number was 45381. Your number was 45381. 45381. 45381.
It was 45326.
Adolf Eichmann is identified without any doubt.
Enough, I accept my fate. My name is Adolf Eichmann.
They kept him hidden for 10 days. After all, he was an Argentinian citizen, and no one could know. The problem for the Mossad agents was now getting Eichmann, their captive, to Israel.
The agents solved the problem by claiming Eichmann was an Israeli El Al pilot and transported him away wearing taped-up swimming goggles, highly questionable from a legal standpoint.
This represented, without a doubt, a violation of international rights. It undoubtedly contributed to diplomatic tensions between Argentina and the then very young state of Israel, in a context in which Nazi hunting was not a state or institutional matter, but was carried out by private individuals.
Eichmann agreed to stand trial in Israel, but why?
He wanted to be seen. He saw himself in a world historical dimension and wanted to remain there. Eichmann was proud of his place in history and wanted it.
The abduction of Eichmann also had drastic effects in Argentina.
In this climate of violence, the kidnapping of Eichmann served to intensify a series of anti-Semitic attacks against the Jewish community of Argentina that had begun prior to the kidnapping. There were attacks in schools, in public places, and even assassinations of some members of the community.
Eichmann was now a prisoner of the State of Israel. He was examined and questioned in a Jerusalem prison, where he underwent an astonishing transformation. His trial would end up lasting more than 8 months, with 380,000 pages of files. The proceedings were followed by people in 38 countries, and the verdict was not in Eichmann's favor. For the first and only time, the paths of Nazi mass murderer Adolf Eichmann and Jewish philosopher Hannah Arendt crossed. Two Germans representing opposing aspects of their country, boundless barbarism on the one side, and the power of reason and rational thought on the other. April 1961. The trial takes place in a Jerusalem district court, closely followed by the population of Israel. Israeli Foreign Minister Golda Meir, who would later become Prime Minister, was among the observers. Only one camera team was allowed in the courtroom. The images went around the world. Eichmann sat behind bulletproof glass, ensuring he remained unharmed throughout the proceedings. Holocaust survivors who watched were shocked and outraged.
For me, my dream at the moment was, as I was standing, to get my blood over, to have something to drink, because my death, due to the high fever, pneumonia and typhus, to drink my own blood, that was my realization, what I was looking for. We used to uncover all the graves that were people killed during the last 3 years, grind the bones, pick out all the valuables in the ashes, like gold teeth, rings, and so on, separate them. After grinding the bones, we used to put out the ashes in the air so they disappear, plant over the graves back, seed back plants so nobody can recognize whenever it was their grave.
And one of them said that they had pulled 50 Jews out of a bunker and they were going to shoot them according to instructions. The commander of the SS people replied, "These are fat Jews. All of them are good for soap." In that group there was an old woman, and at a certain moment an SS man set the dog against her. The dog jumped at her, bit her, clawed out, bit out a piece of flesh out of the lower part of her body and brought that piece of flesh to his owner. This woman, out of fright, she screamed and jumped into the wagon on top of the other people.
After the war, when Holocaust survivors moved to what was back then still Palestine and told the Jews who were there what had happened to them in Europe, no one believed them. They then fell collectively silent. Only when these more than 100 witnesses testified at the Eichmann trial did people believe the Holocaust survivors.
The trial set a process of collective remembering in motion. How did the spectators see Eichmann? As a demon? A monster?
He was able to choose a position that he knew particularly well and that seemed particularly harmless, namely that of the bureaucrat, the one who simply wrote numbers in a ledger. He made himself grey. That's exactly what he did. He made himself a grey mouse. It was done with a perfection that can be frightening.
Eichmann altered his defense strategy. He presented himself as no more than a follower of orders with no hatred of Jews. He pleaded for clemency, but was unable to convince the court.
Eichmann never repented. He believed in what he had done, and he didn't have the feeling that his war was over, so the issue wasn't over for him. He had not, as he had originally intended, killed more, 10 million Jews, or helped to do so. But there were still Jews in the world, so the problem wasn't solved yet.
After finding Eichmann guilty on December 15, 1961, the court sentenced him to death by hanging. The sentence was carried out 6 months later. His body was cremated and his ashes scattered at sea. No grave, no mourning, no remembrance.
The trial led to a completely new understanding of the Holocaust worldwide.
But the question remains of what evil is and what does it look like? The question was the topic of much discussion in the early 1960s. Hannah Arendt published her best-known book, Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil. The term has made history. Arendt's goal was to understand how an unremarkable person like Eichmann could commit such monstrous deeds, devoid of feeling.
The trouble with a Nazi criminal like Eichmann was that he insisted on renouncing all personal qualities, as if there was nobody left to be either punished or forgiven. He protested time and again, contrary to the prosecution's assertions, that he had never done anything out of his own initiative, that he had no intentions whatsoever, good or bad, that he had only obeyed orders. This typical Nazi plea makes it clear that the greatest evil in the world is the evil committed by nobodies. Evil committed by men without motive, without convictions, without wicked hearts or demonic wills, by human beings who refuse to be persons. And it is this phenomenon that I have called the banality of evil.
The evil committed by apparent nobodies remained a lifelong topic of inquiry for Hannah Arendt. For us too, it remains a question to constantly ask and answer. What is evil, and how do we resist it?